The crude oil market is one of the most lucrative industries across the world, and it has changed the fortunes of many nations for the better. But corruption and a lack of transparency in this sector has also affected countries for the worst. The apparent and implied investments in the sector have pulled other investments in host nations over the years. But with the ever-increasing call for cleaner, greener solutions to the global energy mix, a rise in divestments have been hitting many countries in the global south. Nigeria is in that category. Over the years, it has become apparent that Nigerian officials and agencies in this sector have not necessarily been good stewards of the country's crude oil products. Details have emerged of how a former United Kingdom-based trader for Glencore, Anthony Steimler, bribed officials in Nigeria in exchange for favorable contracts from the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC. There are many questions that have swirled around this case, and as of now, there is no statement from the NNPC nor the Nigerian government. Today, we're looking at transparency in Nigeria's oil sector. I'm Tolulop Adeleru-Balogun. Welcome. This is Business Edge. Joining me on today's Business Edge is Desmond Agboifo. He's the Director of Desyton Institute for Petroleum Economics and Management. Desmond, welcome to Business Edge. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tolulop. It's a pleasure to have me on the studio this morning. Thank you.
All right. So let's get into this case, which is quite interesting when you get into some of the details that the courts and the prosecutors have released. But news recently broke less than a month, or rather less than a week right now, that a former United Kingdom-based trader for Glencore, Anthony Steimler, pleaded guilty to bribing officials in Nigeria in exchange for favorable contracts from the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation. Now, some have said this is typically what happens in this industry. There's nothing, unfortunately, outstanding or new in this particular case. And others have also said this is an attempt to taint the image of the NNPC. In regards to this particular case, where do you stand? What do you make of it?
Well, thank you very much, Tolulop. I think the issue has been on for a few days now, and it's quite a story to behold, to be honest. And I think the story has shown a point that there seems to be a lot of murky waters around the industry. But that said, there's always a green light at the end of the tunnel. Nigerian economy always mainstays oil, and we must ensure that this industry stays and away from the practices that will not create a platform for good governance and structures to make things work. Just a case in point, I'm sure, of course, you're also aware, we just passed the PIB. So, that's one of the tenets of good governance, to ensure there's transparency across the sector. And we expect that this is also a work on development to take things to the next forward as an industry. Thank you.
All right. So let's talk a bit more about this sector. As you said, it's the highest earner for Nigeria. Crude oil, many have said that once Nigeria discovered the black gold, Nigeria did not look at any other forms of revenue. And there are often allegations of fraud, corruption, bribery, contract inflation that swirl around Nigeria's upstream and downstream oil and gas sector. Why does it seem that activities in this sector are so murky and they lack transparency?
Well, I think it's quite the norm. Of course, it's not a positive norm, I must say. But one of the points that I would like to start with, just to get a point into context, is just trying to draw some of the words of David Cameron when he said, "The evil of corruption reaches in every corner of the world, and it lies at the heart of the very urgent problem that we face as a country." This is even coming from the UK government. So taking it down home in Nigeria, of course. The point is, wherever there are issues where people need to get on with projects, or with practices, corporately or privately, these issues are there. And that's why companies, that exist, always have what they call policies in terms of anti-corruption policies towards good governance, to ensure that these things have been checked. But be that as it may, the issue is what it is right now. And I think it's something that is not of the best interest for the country. We don't want to expect corrupt practice right now at the time where we're struggling to get oil prices even to the new norms of what it is right now as a country. So I mean, it's not necessarily it's not a win-win for the country, and on the broader scale, it will also impact the level of confidence that investors will be coming to deal with on this platform.
And as you said, the UK government made a statement saying that corruption is everywhere. And this is a case that stretches beyond Nigeria. It involves Switzerland, the United States, and other countries. And it went on from 2007 to about 2008. So over a decade where numerous individuals and companies and countries were involved. Now, we also know that Steinbler is said to have conspired to obtain and retain business for and to direct business to Glencore and its subsidiaries. There are also very strong allegations leveled against NNPC officials. But right now, there's been no official statement from the NNPC, no official statement from the Nigerian government. What do you think about that silence, and many would say very deafening silence in regards to yet another corruption scandal in Nigeria?
Well, yes, definitely we definitely hear some commentaries on the issue as it pertains to an NPC. You're aware the issue is between the Glencore oil trading team and some high officials of the NPC. I'm sure definitely in the next few days. I mean, the story just came out sometime late last week, on Friday, and we expect this issue to be to be taken quite deliberately and also ensure that the response that is required will pass across the various authorities, just to be able to ensure that they have gathered enough information. So I'm quite certain that, yes, there will be a response sooner than later.
Okay, so let's look at what a situation such as this cost us. So aside from corruption and money laundering, there's also the contract inflation. At one point in time, it said that they were tripling the amounts that they were going to put on the contracts in order to make more money. There's also bribery. And one of the major crimes was that the money was exchanged for officials of the NNPC to award oil contracts and provide more lucrative grades of oil on more favorable delivery terms. So it may not have been the most profitable deal for the NNPC, but because of that, the bribery and the corruption, it was the deal that was profitable for these individuals. Meanwhile, Nigeria was then at a loss. So along the line, they agreed to triple the fees paid to an intermediary company. For a country whose main source of revenue is crude oil, we should be looking to make the most profitable deals possible. We should be looking to make as much profit and revenue as we can, since we're focusing almost solely on this source. What does a situation such as this cost Nigeria? How does it affect our bottom line? How does it affect other individuals who want to legally and correctly deal with the country when they're aware of situations such as this?
Thank you very much. Obviously, the issue will always have, of course, a negative impact on the bottom line of the country, which is the NNPC. And case in point, I mean, let me just draw a parallel to what this really looks like. As a country, we produce about 2 million barrels of oil a day, or maybe 1.9 per day. And I think in a particular year, I think between 2017 and 2018, NNPC sold to Glencore 4.8 million barrels, and that translates to about $280 million. And that's on the average of about $58 per barrel. What that really means is, I mean, with this volume of oil coming from NNPC to Glencore, of course, that's a big trading company. That would be that's quite a significant amount of volume. Now, when you talk about tripling, of course, talking about tripling the value, it means that there will definitely be an excess cash flow sweep across the carpets, because that's not necessarily going to go right into the books. It will be an expense directly, because it would create that additional layer of unwarranted costs, if you allow me to use that term. So yes, it wouldn't be in the best interest at all. But however, I think what is even essential here is for the government on the NNPC to ensure that they have a more stricter and more stringent tendering process in the procurement. Glencore is a big name, it's a big brand, and for issues about costs and trying to inflate costs, that must have been clearly be out of place in terms of when you're trying to discuss the proposals. The cost of the crude in the market always have to be firmed up when you have long-term purchase agreement. And when the issue is coming up to inflate costs, of course, that's clearly an issue of corruption in place. And that's not wanted anywhere in the world, including Nigeria, just at the moment. So basically, I think it's something that doesn't look good for both parties, but I think it should be taken a bit deliberately to ensure that these practices are closed gap. I'm a stinker for taking issues, on the positive side. Of course, this is also an opportunity for us to ensure that we tighten our loose ends in our processes of our procurement and also our dealing with our external contractors, mainly because it has an impact in the economy and, of course, also our bottom line as a country. So there should be definitely some practices to ensure that the principles of good governance are interplayed into the structure that we see for a new post-PIB and NPC.
Okay, I want to take you up on that when we come back. We're going to go for a quick break, and that was actually my next question in terms of how the NNPC cleans house, especially since we're looking at bringing in the petroleum industry bill. We're also going to touch on Glencore. Anthony Steinler is not the only former Glencore employee that has actually also found himself in the Justice Department's net, and it's not just Glencore. Right now, the U.S. is investigating a number of big commodities companies because of bribery in some countries. So we'll touch base on that and the responsibility of these companies as well to ensure transparency and accountability in their dealings. We're looking at transparency in Nigeria's oil sector after a former Glencore employee pleaded guilty to conspiring and bribing officials here in Nigeria for more favorable terms for his company. We'll get into that when we come back. Now, still with me is Desmond Agboifo. He's the Director of Desyton Institute for Petroleum Economics and Management. Desmond, right before we went for the break, you had already started talking about the NNPC looking at its supply chain, starting to clean house and tighten things up. And I want us to take that further. So the court papers refer to 7 co-conspirators, both individuals and companies in several countries that were involved in this decade-long scheme. There was a Nigerian company that was used by Glencore and its subsidiaries to bribe Nigerian officials in order to obtain Nigerian oil cargo from the NNPC. But this is not just this case where he has pleaded guilty. There have been numerous allegations over the years about the opaque nature of the NNPC, and it's obvious that this entity has to clean house. We also can't forget the fact that it took them almost 43 years to even release audited reports. So we have a house that no one can see into that is literally sitting on top of the most revenue of a country. What does NNPC need to do to really clean up?
Thank you very much once again. I think the cleaning processes must have been an absolute necessity for us to kickstart a new brand of NNPC. And I'm sure you're aware, reports are already on the way. They now have reports of production data and operating costs. And one of the steps in the right direction, I must say, is the drive towards trying to reduce our operating costs. I mean, right now, I think I've had sessions with the NNPC team during one of the new COPs, so the new cost of production campaign to reduce the cost of production to $10 a barrel. And as being that's made, that's a huge milestone if it's going to be achieved. But my point is, as soon as that is being on the way, which is what is going on right now, I think it began sometime late last year. There's now a lot more transparency in trying to see how the numbers will come to play vis-a-vis our operating costs. And case in point, when we have more clarity in trying to see what we do as a country, which is of course having published financial reports, that people now have clarity to see what is being done as a corporation. That also give us that certainty to say, yes, we're becoming a formidable company as an NPC, and also on the side also trying to make sure that we're also giving investors that boost of confidence that they see when trying to deal with us.
Okay, so literally the law right now continues to sort of prohibit scrutiny of the NNPC's dealings and operations. Oftentimes, some of this information we get is from the other companies, the JV partners sometimes, because they have to release their own accounts and things. And as we mentioned earlier, it was only in 2020 that the NNPC published audited financial accounts the first time in 43 years for 20 of its subsidiaries. So you can imagine the volume of money, the volume of information that the country has not been able to scrutinize over time. But now we have signed the PIB. It's waiting for President Buhari's assent. And there's still a lot of conversations. Host communities are not necessarily happy with what they have. There are those other conversations happening with the oil and gas upstream and downstream sector. Do you think the PIB is going to get us to where we need to go? It's going to open up the sector. It's going to open the sector to scrutiny. Also help us with the NNPC as well in terms of unbundling it and getting us more liberalization of that sector and even more accountability.
Yes, absolutely. I think I want to respond to your last point about if the PIB will take us to where we want to be as a country. Yes, I mean one of the 7 tenets of the benefits of why we have the PIB is, of course, is for transparency and also to increase the value of the country's benefit in terms of oil production. We currently are looking towards achieving about 4 million barrels and also increase our net reserve to about 40 billion barrels. Yes, the PIB will get us there, but I think what is even essential, I think I had a last session with the team where I made it very clear that we need an effective implementation of these policies that have been set forth. I agree, the host community are not particularly happy, but I think what is even clear is that should not even deter us to the goal of trying to create a much more formidable NNPC. 3% translates about $500 million or so, roughly. And of course, there's an operating model that was presented in terms of scenarios by the DMD of NNPC, where they had expert reviews looking at 3% to 7%, the spread of the tranche, to see what would work for them, vis-a-vis also looking at how to increase the long-term productions of the country. So, of course, putting down some fund from the net profit from NNPC of about 30% for frontier exploration funds. So be that as it may, all of these are strategies and frameworks that will enable the country to get to where it has to go. And that's why issues like this, having Glencore in issues with corrupt practices, would not necessarily take us even there. It would take us even 2 steps behind. So yes, going forward, the PIB would really be the level playing field to ensure that we have that platform for sustainability towards a much more profitable oil and gas industry.
All right, so let's talk about Glencore, maybe not just them. So the company released a statement saying that Daimler's conduct was unacceptable and has no place in the company. But the U.S. Department of Justice is investigating the company's activities in Nigeria, Venezuela, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, going back more than a decade. This investigation has been on for over 3 years. In March, another Glencore employee pleaded guilty to manipulating a key oil price benchmark. But Glencore is not the only company being looked into. The Department of Justice is also looking into Vitol, and they agreed last year to pay more than $160 million after it admitted to bribery schemes in Brazil, Ecuador, and Mexico. Internationally, do you think companies are doing enough to stop bribery and corruption in the oil and gas sector? And we see that they do this a lot in countries, unfortunately, that look like Nigeria, where the sector is murky, where you might need middlemen and third parties and intermediaries to help you get things done. What responsibility do these companies themselves have to ensure accountability and transparency in their activities in the sector?
Yeah, thank you. I think clearly, it's very clear, from the issues right now that leading companies, including Glencore, needs to do more. And of course, all around the world, with huge projects just on the way and countries trying to get value for their oil and gas activities. Middlemen and companies who come in and act as intermediary are almost inevitable. But what is even clear is a lot more transparency in how they deal from the part of the sellers and from the buyers. So of course, companies have got to do more. There are instances of where issues have failed. In fact, I was going through a few of the reports from the media. I think it's from Bloomberg, where we've seen that over $2 or $3 million has been whitewashed just on the floor, just for issues of wrong practices of transactions like this. So yes, policies that have got to be implemented must have an approach from cradle to grave. So taking it a lot more holistic to ensure that all of these practices are in place to make sure that people reduce the level of misconduct in the operations, and they also streamline the process to ensure that there's checks and balances as we go on. Yes, the U.S. Justice Commission has made it very clear that the issue system is quite disappointing, I must say. But however, I mean, what is even clear is Glencore, of course, they are also a formidable company who have made it clear that their team on issues like this have got to be looked into very carefully. So yes, it's a work on development, and he has pleaded guilty on a few times. So I think as a country, we also have to ensure that we tighten loose ends so that what has happened in the last few years, or 10 years ago, wouldn't happen again.
And Glencore has been cleaning house, particularly in people involved who hold key decision-making positions in regards to these issues. So over the past few years, they've also been cleaning their house. So let's wrap this up. You said earlier that you do expect the NNPC and Nigeria to make a statement eventually in regards to this case and what goes forward. The court documents do not name who the co-conspirators are. So as of right now, we do not know the Nigerian officials involved nor the Nigerian companies involved. But do you think Nigeria should press, or will press rather, for that information so that on this side of the divide, we're able to also prosecute and move the case forward? And what do you think eventually will happen when the NNPC and the government break their silence?
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, I would take a position that the NNPC has got to press forward to understand who are the co-conspirators of these transactions. And because that will enable us to ensure that, we take out more like the wrong people handling very sensitive position, because that doesn't work towards the interest of the country at all on a broader scheme. And on the issue of the silence, yes, I'm sure once the information have filtered in very, very clearly into the NNPC, and I'm sure they have their structures where they can be able to carry out in-house investigations and really understand what are the issues that has led to problems in transactions. I'm sure we will definitely have them on the media. I'm sure that this will take some time, but we should just allow some time to pass by, let them do their in-house investigations, carry out their checks, and ask the right questions before they come to the media to respond.
All right, so Desmond, I think that's the note we'll end it on. It is a developing story for many of us. While the case has been investigated for about 3 years now, and he pleaded guilty last week, it's just new information for many, many people. So we're going to have to see the time, as you said, for the government to respond and the NNPC to sort of align their ducks and see what comes out. We'll be touching base with you as more information and new updates come in this case. Desmond Agboifo, thank you so much for joining me on Business Edge.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and you have a wonderful time.
All right, we'll see you again soon. So this is definitely a case to watch. A former UK-based trader for Glencore, one of the world's largest commodities trading company, pleaded guilty to corruption and bribery over a 10-year span involving unnamed Nigerian high-ranking NNPC officials and Nigerian companies. How much has this particular scheme cost Nigeria? What's going to be the NNPC's response, and how will the Nigerian government clean house? We'll have all the updates for you as this story particularly continues to develop. Now, to wrap things up, we have NC4 to watch, so stick around. And we start in Nigeria as we give you NC4 to watch. The country's Purchasing Managers Index rose to 55.4 in July from 53.6 in June, according to a report by Stanbic IBTC Bank. The bank said this signaled a marked improvement in business conditions, describing it as one of the strongest PMIs since January 2020. According to the report, Nigeria's private sector began the second half of the year on a positive footing as it continued the run of expansion that began in July 2020. Moving on, the force majeure of Transnet Group's key port terminals division has been lifted to the relief of trucking, freight forwarding, and shipping companies. This follows a cyber attack that hit the entire Transnet Group on July 22nd, forcing it to introduce manual systems. These caused delays and affected business operations, including group emails and websites. Now, despite the lifting of the force majeure of the Transnet Port Terminals Division, most of the group's websites are still offline, including the main Transnet website and Transnet Freight Rail divisions. Number 3 on our list, the latest weekly Mombasa tea auction had 10.8 million kilograms of tea for sale. The amount on sale decreased from 11.7 million kilograms for the same period last year and from 12.4 million kilograms offered during the previous sale. The tea auction recorded a sharp increase in prices, with the kilogram selling at an average of $1.86 compared to $1.59 during the previous sale, but decreased from $1.83 during the same period last year. And the 4 in NC4 to watch, oil prices have fallen more than 3% as the week began due to weak economic data from China and the United States, the world's top oil consumers. Add to this, higher crude output from OPEC producers stoked fears of weakness in oil demand and oversupply. Brent crude oil futures settled down 3.3% at $72.89 a barrel, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude ended 3.6% lower at $71.26 a barrel. And that's Business Edge for today. You can head to our social media timelines and let us know what you think of the conversation. We are at News Central TV. Follow us and subscribe on YouTube, so if you've missed any of our conversations, you can find them there. Download our mobile app on your App Store and Play Store, and of course, watch us live on Star Times Channel 274 and some other platforms. I'm Tolulop Adeleru-Balogun. I'll see you again soon.